Yeah, I thought that's the one. Okay.
Are you ready, Alan? Good. All right, Chair Silverman, whenever you're ready, it is 4 o'clock and we have a quorum, so.
Absolutely. Let's call this meeting to order.
Okay, in terms of roll call, we're just going to confirm for the secretary those commission members that are present. Commission member Driscoll. Commission member Gillum.
Present.
Commission member Martin.
Present.
Commission member Baffa.
Here.
Commission member Seibel.
Present.
And Commission member Mike Sell.
Present.
And Margie, let the record reflect that I don't see either of our youth representatives here, Elizabeth Young or Cale Helzer. So we do have a quorum to proceed, and Margie, can you confirm that we've met the requirements of the Kansas Open Meetings Act?
Yes, I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of today's meeting was provided.
All right, so we have a quorum, and we've met the requirements to conduct an open public meeting, so I'll turn it back over to the chair for consideration of the minutes.
Okay. Are there any additions or questions or corrections to be made to the minutes by any member of the commission?
I move we approve.
I'll second. Any further comments? Okay, let's, do we need to take a vote for approval of the minutes?
Yeah, I don't think we need a roll call. We'll just have all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that minutes have been
Motion passes.
passed unanimously.
Okay, so let's get to the next item on the agenda here.
We have an application that's been filed by Jessica Petros Akuma, and the request is for approval of a certificate of appropriateness to allow exterior renovations to be made to a single-family home that was previously used as an 8-unit apartment building. The property is addressed as 516 South 8th Street, and this property is a contributing property located within the Highland Prescott and 8th Street Historic District. And Mr. Hurst, who's also our moderator, is going to present to the commission a report on this application. And we have the applicants present here in room 107, the meeting room.
All right, so the background of this property is this is a massive two-story, 2.5 story neo-colonial revival residence. It's wood framed with narrow clapboard siding on a cut limestone foundation. Its distinctive cross gable roof extends a prominent gable end towards the street with an offset secondary gable end pedimented at its side, and it has a trio of stair-stepped windows that occur at the larger gable end. You can see them on the front along the roof line there. Dentiled eaves, cutaway bay windows, and flared bell course of cut pattern shingles around the Queen Anne influences. And there's a broad chimney of pattern masonry work that extends at the south building face. So we'll get the south building face here.
Oh my gosh.
So you can see the brickwork here and the gabled roofs and the Queen Anne influences and the fish scale shingles there. The predominant porch dormer leads to the three entrances at the principal facade, which is the east side. And these are placed asymmetrically at the ground porch level. The asymmetrical roof line is punctuated by hip dormers and cross gables, Rafter ends are exposed, and windows are double hung with simple 1/1 sashes. A stained glass panel decorates one gabled end, and there is a 6-car garage that occupies the property towards the back. And this is a later addition. The house was built in 1907 by Dr. A.G. Anderson and his wife, Jenny. Mr. Anderson's specialty was eye, ear, nose, and throat. And following his death in 1939, his wife converted the residence into an apartment house. And her son, Donald Anderson, resided at that house from 1946 until 1970, while continuing the rental of the property. As Dean stated in the introduction, this is part of the Highland Prescott and 8th Street Historic District, which was designated in Salina on June 22nd of 1992, and consists of 77 properties. And this particular property is one of those that is a contributing property. And what that means is any exterior alterations need to be reviewed by this board and approved. And so what we're going to do is kind of walk through some of the elements that are being renovated for this particular property and what the applicant is proposing. We do have a list that is in your packet that I'm not going to go through, but my goal is to hit the highlights. To look at the specifics, you'll need to refer to the list, but we'll try to go through a lot of the highlights here. So on the front side, which is the east-facing side along 8th Street, we have the porch that is going to be removed and rebuilt with new wood structures and new pillars. The applicant is proposing to remove 2 windows on the upper story, or 2 doors, and put in 2 new doors that are above 2 new doors on the main story. This property, because it had been converted from a single-family residence to an 8-unit apartment, has a lot of extra doors that are no longer necessary. And so as we go through this, you'll see that several of them are being removed and replaced with windows or just reboarded up with walls. The siding and most of the exterior of the building is in great disrepair. This property actually has had a history of what we would call maintenance neglect, and in which it's been to the point where it's come close to being completely dilapidated, to the point where it could not be salvaged. And so the applicant is looking to come forward and do major renovations, which would consist of virtually all new windows and doors, as well as all new siding and guttering and new corbels. So you see in the photograph that there's a lot of corbels along the soffit and fascia of the structure, and all of those will need to be replaced as well because they're rotted out. So the applicant is proposing to use new modern materials, but it would essentially keep the appearance virtually the same. And there are some window changes with new modern windows, because the ones that are there have also experienced a lot of decay, and they're looking to make some of the windows more symmetrical. So as you see in the photographs where we have the X's, those are doors that are being removed. The door towards the west end or the back is going to be replaced with a window. This door here that I'm highlighting will be replaced with a wall, and then they're going to match the existing, they're going to put in new windows that are more symmetrical with the existing windows. The awning on the rear side, which is the west end, will be removed. There'll be a larger window replacing the 2 smaller ones, and there will be a window that's completely removed and just put in with replaced with a solid wall. I don't think we actually talked about the south end, other than they are going to have 3 windows up top that will be symmetrical with each other above the existing bay window that they're planning on keeping. There's an exterior door that's being removed and a couple of windows that are being removed, and clapboard siding will be put in their place. So The goal of the applicant when they get through with this project is that it would look very similar to what it is today. We'll go through some of the materials that are being proposed. The paint color, this is an existing paint chip, and what they've done is they've gone and tried to match it as closely as they could with these proposed colors. There's a body color that's the Rookwood blue-green. There's a detail color that's Colonial Revival Gray, which this is a Colonial Revival property in terms of its architectural style. And then there's also a high reflective white for trim. The spindles, the existing spindles are broken and rotten and need to be replaced. And here are the options that the applicant is bringing forward for your consideration and looking for your guidance as to what your preference might be. But there's a few options here that they've identified. There's this decking right here that has more of a traditional look. There's a simple option here, and the current baluster is right there, so you can kind of see how that.
And the current balusters, what condition are they in on the house?
When we get through the report, we'll have the applicant speak to that, but it's my understanding that many of them are in disrepair and need to be replaced. Okay, and then for the corbels, here is the existing corbels, and they're looking to try to construct a corbel that's very similar. And so here's kind of a front view of that corbel. Here's a side view of the corbel. The existing corbel has a little more of a curve, where the proposed is a little more angular. And so you can see what those look like there. And then for doors, there's a Therma-Tru double doors with a transom, decorative transom above it that they're proposing on the front end. And I believe that is for both the first story and the second story. So they're looking to have double doors that kind of stack on top of each other on the front side of the house. So that's what's being proposed. What we did is the conservation ordinance that the city has adopted for alternative or alterations that are exterior to the building, they refer to the Department of Interior's regulations. And so there are 10 specific criteria that are looked at, and I'm not going to go through them individually, other than you can look at them and see if you have any questions. But from what staff could tell, what is being proposed by the applicant is in line with those 10 criteria. So we do have a number of findings of fact here that we feel that the commission could look at in terms of approving the proposed exterior changes. And the first is that the applicant is proposing to convert the property back to its original use as a single-family residence, and is working to repair and maintain the original character of the structure. The second finding is that the existing structure on the subject property is in severe disrepair to the point that many of the exterior structural elements will need to be replaced, including the clapboard siding, round porch columns, and corbels, along with most of the doors and windows. The applicant is proposing to replace these deteriorating materials with similar materials that will closely match the existing materials in design and color, and the applicant is proposing to repaint the exterior in a color that matches the existing exterior. And number 3, the applicant is proposing to replace the deteriorating materials with comparable replacements, maintaining the neoclassical revival design of the original construction. And the replacements will be similar in massing, size, scale, and design, but will be composed of more modern and more resilient materials. And that's really been the issue with this property, is that over time, just because of its age and the kind of maintenance it's received and the neglect it's experienced, it's in rough shape and needs a lot of overhaul. So we have 4 options here, option 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what staff would recommend is option 1, which is the approval of the certificate of appropriateness for the project based on staff's findings that the proposed exterior renovations to this dwelling will conform to the Heritage Conservation District ordinance and the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation for exterior alterations. And so with that, we would take any questions that the commission may have, or if you'd like to speak to the applicant, they're here and represented as well.
Do you have a sample of the material, the lap material that's going to be used? Because when I hear composite, I want to see if it's going to actually look
Yeah,
like what's there.
the applicant is here, and they did bring some that they can bring forward.
Absolutely, please do.
Are there any other questions of staff?
I would just point out to the commission, you can see attached to the report, there was about a 5, 6, or maybe even year period longer where Mr. Berger was working very hard to try to keep this home from deteriorating further and informing
Absolutely.
the owner of their obligation to perform maintenance, and staff actually put together what we called a demolition by neglect ordinance to try to allow the city to intervene in situations like this to prevent homes like this from being forced to be demolished because their maintenance had been so neglected. And this was one that staff was concerned about, that it would, if it continued to be neglected, that the only alternative could end up being demolition.
Well, I'm familiar with the work of Mr. Berger on this property, and I've driven past it for 12 years, and I'm glad that somebody's taking this project on. But what is the texture of the replacement material for the wood lap?
You'll need to go up to the mic and state your name and address, please.
Address?
Yes, your location in Salina.
Okay. My name is Jessica Petrosakuma, and I live at 314 West Prescott Avenue here in Salina. I have a sample of the proposed siding that we will be using. It's a wood-grained composite material. The backing of it is plywood. And
Can you show this? Yeah, there, okay.
Can we get a close-up of that somehow?
Yeah, it's,
camera.
I don't know how to do that. Just,
There we go. Yeah, just aim it straight towards the camera in front of you. Okay, yeah. That's, yeah. The current material on the house, is it textured like this? I don't believe,
It's hard to tell. Most of it's rotting off.
yeah.
And the paint chip that we brought is because it just, the whole thing is.
Well, I
like
understand,
that.
yeah. No, most of the time it would have been a very smooth lap.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit smoother than this.
Okay.
I have no problem with the composite.
You know, okay.
Another thing that we're proposing with the siding specifically is a 5-inch exposure as opposed to a 3-inch. With a 3-inch exposure, those boards are no longer being made, and so every piece of wood would have to be ripped down to size around the entire house. If we were to do a 5-inch exposure, they already come pre-made in this size, and it would greatly decrease the cost of having to replace it all.
And no 3-inch lap board is available anywhere?
Not that we've been able to find.
And you brought one of the railings with you?
Yes. So this is an example of the bolsters that are on the front porches, both upstairs and downstairs. They've all completely rotted, and Most of them have fallen off. The rails themselves have completely come off.
Is that height code, according to code?
No, according to code, these are is about a foot short.
Okay.
And so that's why we proposed the ones that we did. The one in the proposal, both of the round spindle and the square are about the same thickness as this, but because they're taller, the actual spindle itself gets thinner. So this is 2.5 inches wide. The proposed spindle is 2.25. So thickness-wise, they're very similar. This just looks thicker because it's shorter.
Dustin, could you?
I'm sure the existing ones aren't spaced to code either.
No, they're not. And in order to get something this thick,
Yeah, okay.
close enough together, it would look very busy and
It's going to
messy.
look very different, yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You're up.
Dean, maybe you can answer this for us, but I was under the impression that if they're replacing the existing rotting materials on the deck, such as the spindles and the, the handrail, that, direct replacement specifically with a historic house like this it's not required to be up to current code. Is that correct?
Well, if what is there is essentially rotted to the point where it's disappeared, if they have to put back new railings, then any new railings that are installed would have to be installed according to current building code requirements as to height and spacing.
Inspection report. Have to see, because I just don't want, I want everybody to
Oh,
look at it.
I'm just trying to see, I've been searching for the 3-inch siding as well, but
The state review.
it's kind of hard to find it.
We have similar siding on our home on Santa Fe. It's 3-inch, and we recently replaced some of those boards, and we had to rip them down. So I can confirm that they're difficult to find.
Yeah. I'm just concerned about the size, if it's going to look a bit different than the original. But I understand the difficulty in finding that replacement material. Also, the texture is going to also make it. Are you able to save any of the fish scale? Or is that going to come off as well?
Some of it might be able to be repaired, but we plan on replacing the fish scale with something very similar. I have So this is what we plan on using to replace, I don't know if you can see it from there, but there is a scalloped octagon-shaped siding that we will be able to use to replace it with almost the
Okay.
exact same thing. And any place that there is scalloping currently, we plan on replacing it or restoring what's there.
And in terms of the windows, what is the material of the windows made of?
So we hadn't stuck with a brand specifically yet for the windows. There are 2 decorative windows that are on the house currently. We will be keeping those. Facing the front of the house, the large window to the left of the entrance is a beveled glass window, and we plan on keeping that. And then in the bay on the south side of the house, the center window is also beveled, so we will be keeping that as well.
Okay. but in terms of the actual material of the window, I understand you're going to replace double hungs with single hung windows, which will still sort of look the same, but what does the statute say on the material for the window material? Last time I looked, it's, you know, if it was wood, we have to replace, you'd have to go with wood, but am I wrong on that assumption?
Well, you can only, it basically has a where possible clause in it, so if you've got something that's so deteriorated it has to be replaced, the owner has to do the best they can to find materials that are similar if it's possible. And so where you can't replicate historic materials, you just try to use materials that are as close as possible.
Okay. I'm just going back through this list here. It's a massive list of what needs to be done. Any other questions from any member of the commission?
Do you have the
What?
corbels with you?
Yes.
So I'm the husband. My name's Cameron. Nice to meet y'all. So this is an old corbel. The members here can see how deteriorated it is. And this is what we propose.
You're going to want to speak into the mic.
Oh,
They
okay.
can't hear you very well.
I'm usually pretty loud, but I guess not today. This is an old corbel that is pretty deteriorated, and this is what we propose to replace it with.
So on the original, the bottom has rotted out. That's not original. The difference between them is that up here we have a crown molding, and there's a slight curve on the front of it. What we are proposing to do is have it flush. It makes it easier and more secure to attach it to the ceiling that way. So those are the biggest differences.
On the existing corbels, is the wood curved as well?
The wood is not curved, so it's cut out. There's a curve.
Right, I
cut
understand
into
it's
it.
cut out, but obviously there would be, is there material that fills in that gap?
Normally, yes.
Okay, so it's curved around that to cover,
Yes.
um,
And the difference in
and how many of those do you have to replace?
Between 80 and 100. I'm not entirely sure. Because that was the biggest reason why we wanted to make it out of a composite material. Is if we make it out of composite, they come out to be around $3 or $4 a piece. If we have to order them to match exactly, they're around $80 a piece. And so that comes out around $30,000 for the corbels alone.
And you could make that corbel yourself then?
Yes.
So couldn't you add the trim pieces to it on the existing, the crown molding?
We can, and we could also bevel the edges of the flush instead.
Well, I would assume that you could install them and then install the crown molding after you've installed the corbels. But
Yes, we could do that too, if that would be preferred.
I think it would be so far away,
Yeah.
you wouldn't know the difference.
Right, and that's kind of what we had thought too when we came up with the design for the replacement corbels, is because when you're looking at them from the street or even from the yard, really you can't tell much of the difference other than it is at an angle in the front.
I don't have a problem with that corbel.
because the only way I could see to replace, to do it economically would be to add a second board and put it on a bandsaw and cut that curve
we had talked about doing that too, just getting
That's
the
a lot of
bandsaw and, yeah,
That would be a lot of work.
80 to 100, yes.
yes.
Well, and then it's twice that because you got two sides to it.
Well, yeah, I think you could probably, yeah, you could probably figure out, rig up a jig so you could assemble it and then make one cut on the bandsaw.
Yeah,
That would be, that's a lot of work.
it is.
Any other questions at this point?
Do you have anything else to show?
Oh, I love this.
We hadn't talked about this much yet, but on the front of the house, the front porch has to come off just because the foundation under it is not secure enough to support it. And so we have to rebuild it. And what we're proposing is to put a retaining wall instead of pillars, which is what it's on currently. So we would do a retaining wall and then we would cover it in thin cut stone to match the surround that's around the entire house. We would go with a stone from US Stone, and they're very confident that they can match the color exactly. I don't know if you guys can see this or not.
Yep. Match the color of the sandstone, okay.
Yes.
I'm going back to the pictures just to take a look. I see, yes, yeah.
So on the front, the whole weight of the porch is on
Yeah,
what looks like 6 pillars. And so we would put an actual retaining wall to better support the weight, and then cover the edges of it with this stone.
okay, and currently, right now, that doorway has 2 windows on either side of the door?
Downstairs, so in the
Yeah.
center, there's 3 doors currently.
3 doors.
3 doors. There's 1 large window to the left and 3 bay windows on the right.
And you're going to replace that with 1 double doorway?
In the center, yes.
Wow. Anybody have any thoughts about that change of the doorway?
Well, what is existing is not historical, so I think it'd be an improvement.
And not practical.
Probably. I wish we knew what the original looked like. Why those were added to make the apartments is what you're saying?
Yes. The center one is the access to the upstairs currently,
Right.
and then the left and right is the access to the apartments on either side of the first floor.
Wow. I don't know. My guess would have been it would have been a very large one-piece door instead of 2, but I could be wrong. Was it used as a doctor's office in the original?
We don't have any record that it was used as anything but the residence of Dr. Anderson.
Okay.
What the records do show is that after he passed away, his wife went in and made alterations to turn the house into an apartment house. So the additional doors and things like that were put in probably after Dr. Anderson's passing. So you have the period from 1907 to 1939 that we don't have a real good visual record of what it looked like.
All right. Any more questions or comments?
Yes,
from,
what's going to happen to the garage?
So Right now, I think it was misrepresented in the report. It's actually a two.
I didn't hear you.
The current garage is actually a 2, maybe 3-car garage. I think it was reported as a 6-car garage.
Yeah, well, it does say 6, but,
So
so
it's
there,
a-
2 or 3-car garage, and what's going to happen to it?
So we plan on replacing it with a 24 by 24 structure, color and trim to match the house.
So in our report, just to clarify, when we were speaking with the applicant and on their application, the focus was on the exterior alterations. And so what we have indicated in our report is that the demolition and replacement of a structure would be a separate application than what we're dealing with today. So what that looks like is similar to what Ms. Gillum did when she had her garage here a couple months ago, or whatever it was now, where we have pictures of the existing garage and then what's being proposed. Now, the thing to keep in mind when we get to that point is that that particular structure is not part of the contributing character of the property. The contributing character of the property is the dwelling or the residence. But when we get to the point of looking at the detached garage, that would be a separate application for your consideration.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Dean, my only comment, I don't know if you or Dustin know, but I was just looking at the Prescott Foley House on Street View on Google. I believe that's another Queen Anne style home. And I did notice that it does have 2 large double doors on the front. So that's not uncommon for that style of home.
Well, that house, I would, it's quite a bit, I think it's quite a bit more sizable, but yes, you are correct. It is possible. Okay.
Are we ready for a motion?
Well, is there anybody in the rest of the public that has any comments? We do have to ask that question.
I move that.
I don't see anybody.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure we're asking before we continue.
I move we approve a certificate of appropriateness for the project based on staff's findings that the proposed exterior renovations to this dwelling will conform to the Heritage Conservation District ordinance and the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation for exterior alterations.
I'll second that.
Motion is made and seconded. Any comments or questions at this point? Let's move for a vote.
Chair, would you like a roll call?
Sure. Yes, please.
All right. Let's start with Commissioner Bacca,
Yes.
Commissioner Martin,
Yes.
Commissioner Mikesell,
Yes?
Commissioner Seibel,
Yes.
Commissioner Silverman,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillum.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
I wish you all the luck with this project. It's a massive undertaking.
Thank you. We walk past it every day when we go for walks with our kids, and we thought we should at least try to do something with it, so.
It's more power to you. It'll be something to see when it's done.
Yes.
All right. Staff, do we have what's next on our agenda?
We have no administrative items or any preliminary discussion items. In terms of public forum, we don't appear to have anybody on Zoom. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to mention anything else? That would take us to potential adjournment. Although Dean does have a picture from, I think it's 85, that he can share with everybody real quick.
Okay.
If we can get the camera to zoom in on this right here, 516. This is a photograph of what 516 looked like when the historic district was first created. So this right there, and I'll pass it around to the board members, but if the camera could zoom in on that, that's what the home looked like before the neglect of maintenance.
Okay, oh, okay, I could barely see it.
I can try to move it closer to the camera. I don't know the most advantageous place to put it for the camera purposes, but
I do have, there's some old business that came up in an email, I think between last week and this week, I'd like to ask staff about. And that's the Underground Railroad, the National Park Service designation for our cemetery. We've kind of been sitting on this one for a little bit. So can we get an update? I think we were first approached in late 2019 on this. And I know COVID has kind of put a halt on some things, but it's still possible for us to get into the National Park Service Underground Railroad listing for August Bondi's gravesite.
in terms of staff, current staff, we have no knowledge of anything about this. I think there was maybe attempts at communication with Mr. Berger when he was on furlough, and then with Mr. Berger after he retired. This is the first communication I've had from Deonda Johnson, but in terms of process, we have gone through the steps, and she's agreed to provide staff with technical assistance. What it's going to require is a letter on letterhead from the owners of the cemetery,
Which is us.
allowing that. Well, it's not us. It's what we have to be sure of is that neither staff nor the Heritage Commission can impose a financial obligation on the city to maintain something. So if there is no fiscal impact to the city by simply adding the grave site as is, and there's no plan to construct a monument or marker or anything else that has to be maintained, then a letter from the Parks and Recreation Director authorizing the listing of the grave site would be sufficient, and then there has to be a nomination form submitted to the National Park Service, and the next round of applications is due July 15th.
All right. Well, I'm looking at the email chain here dating back to November of 2019, and John Berger wrote to the National Park Service on or around January 24th of 2020 in his official capacity. Then the next email that I see in that chain is August 3rd of 2020. And then we have August 4th, August 28th, September, October, and then we get into April of this year. So my assumption was that this had been looked into. We're simply being added to a website, which is part of an application that the NPS has for this. So I don't believe there's any cost to the city, but there was a question of whether or not, and again, the city owns the cemetery. So when I said it was us, that's what I meant. It owns the cemetery, the city does. So can we get this put together by the next deadline?
I can't say for certainty that we can, but we're going to work with Ms. Johnson, and she's agreed to work with us to provide any support and assistance we need, and she seems quite encouraged about making that happen. So we're going to work with her to try to meet the July 15th deadline.
Would it help if we had an official motion? I thought we had an official motion from this commission before on this.
It would not help if we had an official motion.
It would not help.
No. Because
Okay.
staff is directed, and our resources are directed by the city manager and by our directors, and so we've got to meet the priorities that are assigned to us by them. We are down one planner, and prior to that, we had Mr. Berger on full furlough and then retirement with a 1-month interlude. So we are not operating at full capacity, and if we can fit this in and do it, we will do it.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions about this application process?
For the benefit of other commissioners, this is something that's called the National Trail to Freedom, and it's a program that provides historical information about the Underground Railroad network in the Midwestern states, and it has a directory of historic sites associated with the operation of the Underground Railroad. And Mr. August Bondi, who was a Salina resident, was involved in activities that supported the efforts of the Underground Railroad. So the proposal is to add his gravesite to a list of sites within the Midwestern states that are associated with the history of the Underground Railroad.
All right. That's all I had. Anybody have any other questions or queries of staff, old business, or potentially something that needs to be put on the docket for new business for next time?
I move we adjourn.
Any seconds?
I'll second.
All right. Motion. Anybody opposed to adjourning? All right. I'm going to guess that the motion carries with a nod of approval from everyone. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to our staff, as always. And again, good luck with 516 South 8th Street. Thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.